Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
Global trade is changing fast. The way countries buy and sell things to each other is not the same as before. This makes things uncertain for businesses all over the world. Some of the most important countries in this changing trade are the United States, Mexico, and China. Recently, the U.S. government, led by President Trump, decided to put tariffs on goods. Tariffs are like taxes on things coming from other countries. At first, these new tariffs were planned for goods from Mexico and Canada. This made businesses worried, and the stock market went down a little. The U.S. government said the tariffs were because of trade problems, but also because of other issues like drugs and people moving between countries. This made it hard for companies to plan what to do. Later, the U.S. changed its mind about tariffs on Mexico and Canada. However, there were still tariff problems with China. Chinese companies also felt unsure about what was going to happen next. This book will look at these changes in global trade. It will focus on the tariffs from the U.S. government and how they affected Mexico and China. 2. The tariff threat. We will discuss the moment when the idea of tariffs became a real worry for many countries. It was when the Trump administration announced possible new taxes on goods coming from some of America's closest neighbors. The announcement was about tariffs, which are taxes on imports. These taxes can make goods from other countries more expensive. The U.S. government, under President Trump, said it might put a tariff of 25% on goods from Mexico and Canada. This was a big number, and it caused immediate concern. Businesses were the first to react. Companies that trade with Mexico and Canada became very worried. They did not know what to expect. It was hard for them to plan because the situation was changing quickly. The stock market, which shows how investors feel about the economy, also reacted. When the tariff threat was announced, stock prices went down. This showed that people were uncertain and worried about the future. President Trump gave reasons for these possible tariffs. He said it was not just about trade. He also mentioned problems like drugs and immigration. He suggested that Mexico and Canada needed to do more to stop these issues. By using tariffs, he seemed to be using trade as a way to deal with other problems. Some experts pointed out that these tariffs were unusual. Normally, tariffs are used to help a country's own industries or to solve trade disagreements. But in this case, the reason seemed to be wider than just trade. This made it even more difficult for businesses and other countries to understand and respond to the threat. The idea of a 25% tariff on goods from Mexico and Canada was a serious threat. It created uncertainty and worry. It showed how quickly trade policies could change and how these changes could affect businesses and the economy. The next chapter will look at how Mexico, as a major trading partner of the U.S., reacted to this tariff threat. 3. Mexico's response. Mexico is a very important trade partner for the United States. In fact, it is the biggest one. When the U.S. talked about putting taxes, called tariffs, on goods from Mexico, it caused a lot of worry in Mexico. One important person in Mexico, Mr. Jorge Castaneda, who was a foreign minister before, said that all of this was hard to understand. He was happy that the U.S. delayed the tariffs for a month, but he asked why the U.S. announced them in the first place if they were going to delay them. He said it made businesses nervous, especially those thinking about working or investing in Mexico. Mr. Castaneda explained that it is difficult to understand what the U.S. will do next. He said that if these tariffs had been put in place for a long time, it would have hurt the Mexican economy a lot. However, even with the delay, businesses are still not happy. They feel like trouble is still coming. The biggest problem is that no one knows what will happen next. Because of this, Businesses are not sure about making plans or investments in Mexico. For example, car companies, drink companies like tequila and beer makers, and electronics companies cannot plan for the future. They do not know what to expect from week to week. Even though some tariffs were stopped for now, it is only for goods covered by the USMCA agreement. This is a trade deal between the US, Mexico, and Canada. But this agreement only covers about half of the goods that Mexico sends to the US. So, there is still uncertainty about a lot of trade between the two countries. Mr. Castaneda gave an example of the car industry. About 80% of cars from Mexico to the US follow the USMCA rules. The other 20% pay a small tax already. It was not clear if the new, bigger tariffs would also be put on these cars. It was also not clear which other Mexican products were not covered by the USMCA and could be affected. He also mentioned that there were problems at the border between the US and Mexico. Many trucks were stopped because people were not sure how to cross with their goods. Mr. Trump, the US president, said he was doing this because of drugs, immigration, and to get more money and reduce the trade deficit. But Mr. Castaneda said that it is hard to know which reason is the real one, because it seems to change all the time. If Mr. Castaneda was still the foreign minister, he said he would wait and see what happens. He would not react to every announcement from the US. Instead, he would try to talk to the US president to understand what he really wants. He said this kind of important talk cannot happen just on the phone. People who own a small business that makes and sells mezcal, a type of drink from Mexico, share their views on the situation. They export mezcal to the US. They said that the people who make mezcal and the people who import it to the US were very worried. The US is a very important market for mezcal. Because of the tariff news, they did not know what to do. They could not plan because things were changing so quickly. If tariffs were put on mezcal, it would hurt the farmers in Mexico who make it. Even though it seemed tariffs on mezcal were stopped for now, they said they needed to be sure. Importers were not buying much mezcal, and producers were not sure how much to make. They hoped the situation would get better so they could continue to send mezcal to the US. They said they did not really understand why the US was doing this. They thought it might be a tactic to negotiate something. But they also said that it was making many people angry and confused, which could cause problems. In conclusion, Mexico's response to the US tariff threat was mainly worry and uncertainty. Important people and small business owners were concerned about the economic damage and the difficulty of planning for the future. They saw the situation as unpredictable and hoped it was just a temporary tactic. But they were also aware of the real and negative impacts of this uncertainty on Mexican businesses and the economy. 4. China's situation. China has a different situation with tariffs compared to Mexico. While Mexico saw some tariffs reduced, tariffs on some goods from China are still increasing. Chinese companies are watching the situation closely. They are getting information from news and social media. They say it is difficult to know what will happen next. There is not much communication from the US government to the Chinese government about these changes. This makes it hard for businesses in China to plan. They do not know what to expect. They ask questions like, will there be more tariffs? When will these changes happen? This unpredictability is a big problem. Companies are surprised by the speed and suddenness of the changes. Some Chinese companies think about investing in other countries instead of the US. It takes time to build factories and start new businesses. If the rules can change quickly, it is risky to invest. This situation creates risks for global trade. Companies may need to change their supply chains to avoid these risks. This is called de-risking. In China, The National People's Congress is an important meeting. It happens every year. In this meeting, leaders talk about the country's plans. This year, the focus is on the economy. Premier Li Chang talked about the economic growth target. The target is 5% growth for the year. To reach this goal, the government plans to spend more money than it earns. This means the budget deficit will be bigger. This is the biggest deficit in many years. The government wants to use this money to help the economy grow. They will spend on things like infrastructure and social programs. Unemployment is a concern in China, especially for young people. Many young people who finish university are finding it hard to get jobs. The unemployment rate for young people was almost 16% at the end of last year. This number does not include students who have graduated but have not found work. If students are included, the number is even higher. The government is trying to find ways to create more jobs. New technologies like artificial intelligence, AI, may also affect jobs for young people. AI can do some jobs that young people used to do when they started working. This makes it even harder to find entry-level jobs. The Chinese government is aware of these challenges and is working on solutions to improve the job situation for young people and strengthen the economy. Some young people feel that it is hard to find good jobs and are choosing to lie flat, meaning they are doing the minimum to get by. Companies are also facing difficulties, and some are also doing just enough to survive. 5. Jobs and the economy. China is facing challenges with jobs for young people. Many university graduates are finding it hard to get work. This is becoming a serious problem as millions of young people leave education each year and look for jobs. The number of young people without jobs in China has been high. Even when students looking for their first job are not included in the official numbers, the rate is still concerning. One factor making it harder for young people to find jobs is the rise of new technologies like artificial intelligence or AI. AI is changing the job market. Some jobs that young people usually start with, entry-level jobs, can now be done by computers and machines. This means fewer of these jobs are available. Finding work is not only difficult in China. In other big economies, like the United States and the United Kingdom, young people also face challenges when starting their careers. In many countries, there are not enough people wanting to work in certain sectors, such as caring for older people. There can also be a mismatch between the skills people have and the skills that employers need. Companies may be looking for engineers, but there might be more graduates in other subjects. In some countries, older workers are also choosing to work for longer, which can mean fewer job openings for younger people. In China, a trend called lying flat has emerged. This describes a situation where some young people, and even some companies, are doing the minimum needed to get by. Faced with job difficulties and economic pressures, some individuals and businesses are reducing their ambitions and efforts, focusing on just surviving the current economic conditions. 6. Defense and letters. In Europe and the US, there is talk about spending more money on defense. This is because of worries about security. Some leaders in the US think European countries should pay more for their defense. Ursula von der Leyen, a leader in Europe, said that Europe is serious about its security and will spend more, better, and faster. Countries in Europe are working together to increase their defense efforts. When we look at China, they also spend money on defense. However, if we compare it to the size of their economy, it is less than some might think. One expert said that China's official defense spending is about 1.2% of their GDP. The U.S. spends more, around 3.4% of its GDP on defense. While China's official number is lower, Some believe their actual spending might be higher if we include other things. Even if it is higher, it is still not as much as the US in percentage of GDP. China's military is growing and becoming more modern. This is a concern for countries near China. China is building more ships for its navy and planes for its air force. They are also developing new missiles. It seems that China is focusing on making its military stronger in its region. Experts say that what Europe does might not change China's plans for defense. China is more focused on the US and countries around it, like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, when thinking about defense. Now, let's change the topic to letters. In Denmark, something interesting is happening with their postal service. The Danish Postal Service will stop delivering letters at the end of this year. This is because people are not sending letters anymore. The number of letters has gone down a lot, about 90% since the year 2000. People are using email and other digital ways to communicate instead of letters. Because of this big drop in letter sending, the Postal Service is losing money. It is not a good business anymore to deliver letters in Denmark. The Postal Service will also have to cut jobs, about 1,500 jobs. Some people think that this is because the Postal Service has become more like a private business. In the past, it was more of a public service. As a business, it needs to make money, and delivering letters is not making money anymore. Digitalization, meaning using computers and the internet more, has changed how people communicate and affected traditional services like letter delivery. Even though letters are becoming less common, some people still think they are special, especially for things like love letters or birthday cards. However, for everyday communication, digital methods are now more popular and practical. 7. New ways of business. Businesses are always looking for new ways to sell things. In the past, companies used big television adverts or newspaper pages. Now, things are changing. More and more people are buying things online. This means businesses need to find new ways to reach customers on the internet. One new way is using influencers. You might know about big social media stars with millions of followers. These are macro or mega influencers. They can earn a lot of money to show products to their followers. But there is a new type of influencer becoming popular: micro and nano influencers. These are people with fewer followers, sometimes only a few thousand. Micro influencers might have around 70,000 followers, and nano influencers even less. They are not as famous as the big stars, but they can be very important for businesses. Why? Because they often have a closer connection with their followers. People trust them more. If a micro-influencer likes a product, their followers are more likely to believe it is good. This is because micro-influencers often talk about things they really like, not just things they are paid to promote. For example, Geraldine is a micro-influencer in India. She talks about food and lifestyle. For one post showing a product, she can earn around $300. Nano-influencers, with even fewer followers, might earn from $10 to $100 per post. Big stars can earn thousands or even millions of dollars for one post. Businesses are finding that micro-influencers can be very effective, especially for smaller companies or niche products. These influencers often have a very specific group of followers who are really interested in what they talk about. This means the adverts are seen by the right people. This new way of advertising is changing things for traditional media, like magazines and television. More money is going online to influencers. Shops are also changing. With more online shopping, some shops in towns and cities are closing because fewer people are going to them. What about the future? Some people think that even influencers might change again because of new technology like AI. artificial intelligence. Maybe in the future, people will have AI friends online who suggest products just for them. These AI friends would know what they like and could give very personal recommendations. It is not clear exactly what will happen, but it is clear that the way businesses sell things is changing fast. Micro and nano influencers are part of this change, and new technologies like AI will likely change things even more in the future. Businesses need to be ready to adapt to these new ways of working to reach their customers. 8. Looking to the future. What will happen next in the world of business and global events? One area that is becoming more important again is space. Countries and companies are looking to the moon and beyond. It is not just governments anymore. Private companies are also playing a big part. Why are people so interested in space again? For some, like the US, going to the moon is a step towards going even further, perhaps to Mars. Space is seen as important for the future. It's not just about exploration. There are also resources in space, and maybe even tourism one day. Private companies like SpaceX are making space travel more possible. They have developed rockets that can be used again, which makes launches cheaper. This means more companies and even universities can send things into space. More countries are also joining in. India, Japan, and China have all recently sent missions to the moon. However, with more activity in space, there are also new problems. One concern is space junk. Old satellites and rocket parts are floating in space. This junk can be dangerous and could even fall back to Earth. Another question is, who will control space in the future? Will it be governments, or will private companies take over? This is something that needs to be decided as more and more nations and businesses look to space. Looking back to Earth, China's role in the world is changing. Some people see China as a country that could help bring peace. For example, China helped Saudi Arabia and Iran to improve their relationship. Some think China could also play a role in ending the war in Ukraine. China is trying to show itself as a stable and reliable country in a world that is changing quickly. In conclusion, the world is facing many changes. From trade and technology to space exploration and international relations, things are uncertain. The future is not clear, but space and China's global role are definitely areas to watch closely. Businesses and governments around the world are trying to plan for what comes next. But in this fast-changing world, it is not always easy to know what the future holds.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.